My name is Jonathan Bubb Jr., and I completed my Liberty University practicum with the Northeastern New York chapter of the American Red Cross. This practicum involved making the temporary shelters that the American Red Cross sets up and run more disability friendly during times of disasters. Now we're going to delve into the scope of the problem that is facing disabled people throughout the United States during these times of disasters. Research has shown that over 56.7 million disabled persons live in the United States at this time. When compared to the entire national population, this equates to over 19% of the population being disabled in one form or another. Due to this disability, they are extremely vulnerable during natural disasters. They face more adversity, they have more medical problems than the normal person would, and often require special assistance or accommodations during these times. These accommodations or needed support can often come or be characterized in a variety of ways. The first way is communication. This is how the patient is going to be able to communicate with the environment around them, whether this be through an interpreter, someone who knows sign language, or even having materials that are provided to them in Braille. The next major issue that these people are going to face during these times of disaster is health maintenance. This area revolves around keeping the people healthy, making sure that they are able to meet all of their health needs in one form or another. This might be replacing, the batteries in their hearing aids, or providing them with more diabetic supplies so that they can keep their sugar under, a needed level, or any other type of healthcare need that would normally take place in their home. When we talk about maintaining independence, the key area here is the fact that these people need to feel like they're independent. They need to feel that they're not trapped in these shelters, and they still need to be able to make things like their doctor's appointments. They need to be able to contact family and friends. If they need to go to the grocery store, this is going to be an area where they need assistance. Service and support needs, these are going to be in regards to usually mobility devices. So if they need to have their scooter recharged or have a new battery or a power source, or if the batteries in their hearing aids, died and need to be recharged. These are all the areas that fall under service and support needs. The last area is going to be transportation. So as we talk about transportation, this could be as simple as getting them, down to the grocery store so they can pick up some food, or they may need medical transportation to the hospital if some unforeseen circumstance comes up with their medical care and their medical condition. About the American Red Cross and their support of temporary shelters. The American Red Cross is one of the largest not-for-profit organizations in the United States, and at this time it has over 600 local chapters. It employs over 35,000 employees, and it also has a force of about 500,000 volunteers. Whether a disaster is big or small, natural or man-made, they typically respond to these. So if someone's house burns down and it's only 5 or 6 people, the Red Cross is still going to respond. Or if it's, a situation like Hurricane Katrina where there's millions of people who are displaced, the Red Cross is still going to respond. One of the major areas that they assist in these disaster situations are temporary shelters. These are shelters that are set up. They provide relief from the elements, a place to stay that's warm, safe, and out of harm's way. This could be if, say their house burned down and they needed a place to stay, or if the entire city's been evacuated and these people now out of danger need somewhere where they can reside until it is safe for them to return to their homes. Besides temporary shelters, the American Red Cross is also responsible for providing medical care during disasters. So they do have a large force of volunteers that are physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioner, nurses, EMTs, and paramedics that are highly qualified to provide care during these times. The function of the temporary shelters are going to be physical sheltering. So this is getting them out of the cold, out of the rain, and keeping them dry and warm. It is going to help with assisting in healthcare needs. So if the person has lost their medications or needs a new battery for some kind of medical device, this is an area where they can get these supplies. Monetary assistance to replace the medications and other healthcare supplies is a major part of the American Red Cross. They're always seeking new ways to help stretch the resources available to them to help people replace these medications. With most medications being upwards of hundreds of dollars, without health insurance, this can be a very challenging aspect of helping these people. The other area where the American Red Cross is going to help with their temporary shelters is providing food for those in the shelter. Often these people are not able to bring their own food, so providing them with 3 meals a day that is warm and um, fills their needs is extremely important. The objectives of my practicum. My first objective was to determine the most common types of disabilities that volunteers would encounter. When trying to determine areas where the temporary shelters could improve, it was vital that we determined which disabilities were the most common that volunteers would encounter. It doesn't help to train someone for something they may never see, but rather train them for the most common things that they will be encountering as they volunteer with the American Red Cross. The second objective was to ensure that there's a system in place to assess and determine whether disabled persons were stable enough medically to reside in a shelter. While someone who can't walk and is in a wheelchair really doesn't need that much to make their stay at a temporary shelter successful and safe, someone who's on a portable ventilator, who needs suctioning, and requires medical personnel at all times really is not appropriate to be staying in a temporary Red Cross shelter and should be evacuated to a medical facility. The last objective of the practicum was to prepare Red Cross staff to recognize and assist these persons however they needed. Methods. So the method by which I will be attempting to achieve my objectives was first I needed to review the Red Cross documents and policies concerning disabled persons using temporary shelters. So to do that, I went through any Red Cross documents that were made available by the Northeastern chapter in the Albany, New York area to see what was currently being done and any documents, any protocols that were in effect when dealing with people who were disabled. The second portion was the creation of a comprehensive assessment document and the associated protocols to assist this portion of the population. It is very important that there is a standardized, comprehensive assessment of the disabled person when they come to the shelter. That way, all possible scenarios or medical conditions are discovered and an appropriate decision made on whether they are stable enough for the shelter. The third method was to create a standardized training program for the American Red Cross shelter volunteers that ensures long-term retention of information. The major issue was if someone does not volunteer quickly after the training program, just how long are they going to be able to maintain that information before they start to lose important pieces of knowledge. As I was unable to actually conduct the training due to needs after hurricanes in Florida in the southeast this year, I actually went and pulled several different studies that followed people who had taken an advanced cardiac life support and tracked their retention and knowledge. As we can see on the left, we have the study with the author and the year down through from 2009 all the way to 1983. Under education level, a new MD would be someone who just graduated from medical school, RN being a registered nurse. For Miato in 2008, an HCP means a healthcare provider. Underneath that, we have anesthesiologists. Below that are um, certified respiratory nurse anesthetists who often perform the roles of an anesthesiologist without being an actual physician. The next three studies were run by RNs. Underneath that is the treatment of cardiac pulmonary arrest patients, and then below that being another healthcare provider and MD. If you notice, we have the number of participants listed from top to bottom. These are not in order by the number of participants, rather by in the year that the study was published. The next column over is the knowledge retention. So it talks about how the retention of knowledge either declined or stayed the same between 6 months and a year. While some studies did not have knowledge retention built in, they did often have skills retention. So if we look at Smith in 2008, we can see that there is no knowledge retention discussed. However, he did talk about the passing rate decreasing by 30% at 3 months and up to 14% at 6 months. We next took this information and put it into a bar graph to show the differences between the different medical studies. We can see a lot of variability between study to study, and at times it did not give us a clear picture of why certain populations had declined in retention more than others. Once we interpreted this data, we did conclude that there was quite a few outliers which would need to be ignored. The sample size was not as large as we would have recommended for a topic such as knowledge retention that affects all people. While this topic, or this set of studies, had around 1,100 participants, to study knowledge retention in a general sense, we would have needed many more participants. With that being said, for an advanced cardiac life support class run by the AHA, this sample size was significant enough that we could make recommendations regarding course retention. Even based on the data obtained, it was safe to say that the longer someone goes without knowledge or without using the knowledge or skills, the less they will remember. So it is very important that these volunteers for the American Red Cross quickly go out and use what they have been trained in so that they do not forget the information. Lastly, recommendations. So recommendations for the American Red Cross in regards to their temporary disability shelters would consist of ensuring that the material was always presented in a way that covered multiple learning styles, whether this was hands-on, reading, writing, listening. There needs to be multiple learning styles covered in each training session. Ideally, those that are being trained need to have some level of knowledge or medical training regarding the disability types, standard operating procedures for temporary shelters, and any other knowledge that might be important when taking a training class on disabilities. Following the training, volunteers should be involved quickly and in all aspects of assessing those with disabilities and making the decisions on how to best care for them in a temporary shelter. Following the main training session, there should be short review classes made available to those who did take the training, whether this was online in the form of a distributed document that had a short post-reading quiz, or whether it's an actual training class. It's important to refresh that material as often as possible. Following two slides are my references for these slides and the different training sessions, as well as the studies I obtained information from. I appreciate you listening and hope you have a great day.